Now, as I'm throwing in the sky color here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the value a little bit than what I see in the photo. It's a little bit too light, and what I want to do is emphasize the light on the focal area, which is that kind of funny shaped L-shaped building, and that is going to be, the area that I want you to look at. So it has more saturated color, it has that strong warmth in it. And here in the back, I'm going to gray off the sky a little bit more and set it back a little bit further so it looks like the sky, but it has some warmth to it because the sunlight is penetrating those areas. There's some atmosphere from the land and maybe some pollution that is in that area as well. So it's not a strong blue. And now what I'm I'm kind of building the color around and shaping some of these little objects here on the top. And I think this is kind of a fun area where you go and kind of put the sky around some of these objects. And this is where you kind of refine the drawing. And this is so much funner. I just enjoy this a lot more than doing like charcoal, which is so tedious. And paint is just it's so much better to chip into little shapes and little areas. Not that charcoal has its place. I mean, it's certainly a beautiful medium, and it's probably the closest thing to oil painting as a dry medium than any other thing. But at the same time, it takes time to build up those layers in charcoal, and I just find this nice immediacy that occurs when I'm painting with oil. And so a lot of times, instead of working with charcoal, I'd rather just work black and white with oil paint. And I think I get to what I want a little bit faster that way. And so I see a lot of these smaller sketches as kind of what a figure painter, somebody that loves to draw the figure would be doing. These shorter kind of studies before getting into larger paintings. And a painting like this is the size is 12 by 16, and so it's not a huge size. Again, I think the type of painting that I'm doing here is more what I would do on location. Again, harkening back to this idea of plein air, and plein air paintings generally are a little bit smaller. Of course, you can do larger paintings in the field. I know Soroya did stuff like that, but that was multi-day paintings, and my goal here is to do something smaller, a little bit less ambitious. Right now I'm just correcting a little bit of that lighter color on that little beach house, and just getting a little more contrast there, and also desaturating it by putting a little bit of the light white over the top. But what I've done as well is I've thickened up the paint a little bit more, and so now it's thicker on the light side than it is on the shadow side, which helps enhance the light as well. So that's kind of what I'm talking about as I kind of build things up. Keep the shadow sides a little bit thinner and then build up the lights, so that you have a little bit of dynamic between the two. Okay, as we continue on here, now I've got everything for the most part filled in. It's now a matter of really deciding what areas I want to develop further and what areas I want to just leave as it is. And the areas that I want to work on first, you can see I'm starting to develop the focal points. So now that I've kind of brought everything up to the level of finish of the focal point, I want to now take the focal point area further, and then I have to see what the other elements need in order to help and assist the focal point, help lead the eye to it, and little details here and there, nuances. Like right now, what I'm adding is a little bit of the shadow that's being cast by that smaller little house or dwelling there, and it's casting a shadow up onto this larger building. And I just want to make sure that I add little elements like that because it'll add to the quality of the light, add a little bit of nuance. There's a little bit of a temperature difference, something really cool next to something really warm. So start to play around with things like that. And again, this is something where I'm always careful not to overwork it. And I won't stay in the area that long. I kind of will bounce around a little bit so that I don't just go in and over render the heck out of the focal point. I want to make sure that there's some balance in some of the other areas. And the more detail that I put in the focal area, maybe the more refinement detail I can put in other these smaller structures and buildings. But what I'll do is probably put some things in and then take them out. It's just that back and forth until you find the right mix. So it's not about just trying to create a three-dimensional space like what we do in our studies. We want to learn how to do that, but here this is more about, okay, what is working, what is leading the eye, what is helping create this mood. It never is about, well, I gotta just add more blades of grass because that's what I see. That's not what I'm looking at. I'm looking at just big relationships, big shapes, and just seeing how these things kind of relate to each other. So as I'm putting this blue in, what I'm trying to do is relate some of the colors that are up in the sky down onto the ground plane. And I'm always looking to do that because if the painting is always just about these really rich warm colors in the bottom and then cool colors in the top, there's just no relationship. And so even if I didn't see this blue reflection there, I would still want to put some there. Of course, you do see it. That's just kind of how nature works, fortunately. But and I will exaggerate that blue a little bit more. You can see some of the blue on top of the roof, the blue that's found in some of the shadows. So I'm always looking for some blue to add into these foreground areas in order to, tie everything together. And that's a big part of what I'm trying to do, is that harmony. And I think that's a principle less of representational art and something more of abstraction, or at least the type of abstract art that I like, where everything kind of relates to each other in a strong design sense. Something like Richard Diebenkorn, he really would think about how certain colors related to other colors in his pieces. And I would like, that's the kind of same type of goal that I have here. So it's less about trying to say, well, it's because the the sky is reflecting into these wetter parts of the ground, where the ocean waves would come up, which is certainly true. But it's the reason why I would paint it is just so that it harmonizes. One thing I'm doing here too is adding a little bit more warmth into those blues, like dirtying up them up a little bit so that they become a little bit more harmonious down there. I think there was just too strong a separation with the kind of some of the cold colors and the warmer ones. And I don't want that color everywhere. So now that I'm put that kind of initial base on, I kind of layer on an additional layer of this cool blue. And you'll see I'll keep working on that till I get kind of the right mix. I want the kind of streaks going back and forth, so you get a feeling that it is, if there's water on it or wetness on it, it's kind of very shallow. It's not like it's a deep pool by any means. This is something where it's just the wet sand and not like a pond or anything like that. So I'm trying to work to some degree, get that effect, but more often than not, just want to break up the shapes down at the bottom there to be a little bit more interesting.